All right, hey guys, welcome to week 4. So far we've done 4 different little mini units that all kind of participated in the formation of rock and roll. We had spirituals that led into the blues, right? Again, that was over a long period of time. Spirituals being more so the frame of time where African Americans were enslaved, and then blues being a little more in the post slavery, but still segregated America. Then we had Tin Pan Alley, which was the first real music publishing business that really started to drive like the music that people were listening to. And for the first time, business sort of started to drive popular music. And also we kind of branch off into like Broadway and vaudeville and all that, right? But we also see the rise of country music, which kind of came out of this, the story of America, the story of people. And this was predominantly the story of more Appalachian or Western white Americans. So we have these different sounds coming from like a more Appalachian white America. We have sounds coming out of the blues from different parts of the country, Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans. And all of this music starts to like coalesce, which means like blend together. And we start to see things, the lines get blurred between when you hear a song and you can't really put it in one of those boxes. So the first real part where we see this blossoming is in this next origin, which is like the grandpa of rock and roll. Okay, so all this started to coalesce and we get into what's called rhythm and blues. Rhythm and blues, you've probably heard of, but some of you might not have even known. I bet most of you have heard of R&B, right? R&B stands for rhythm and blues. It's the same thing. What differentiates this 1940s, 50s rhythm and blues is it's a different sound than like current day rhythm and blues. But it's the same umbrella, if that makes sense. We'll delve more into that later. So when you hear this, you're gonna think that sounds more like old school rock pop. Like that's probably what your brain will say, but it actually is what we call rhythm and blues. So the blues, which we listen to, gets mixed with like this driving beat that a little bit kind of came out of country. But it also is telling stories of the people, much like country and the blues. The stories may have been different, but it was still a way for people to tell stories, right? The instruments, again, started to blur. So in country music, we had electric instruments. In the blues, we didn't so much. The later blues we did, but the early blues, like Robert Johnson and those early blues artists, didn't use electric instruments. But in rhythm and blues, they start to. And that came out of country. So all this is sort of mushing together, and we get like this what I call the predecessor of rock and roll, which is rhythm and blues. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading this and elaborate on some things as we go. Originating in around 1940, the term rhythm and blues was coined, primarily to separate white music from black music. Now, what I mean by that is, if there was a song that someone liked that was by a white artist, typically only white people at this time, we're talking, again, 1940s, give or take, typically people were listening to music by people of the same race. Now, not everyone, I'm just saying predominantly. So they came up with the term rhythm and blues because the old term they had been using for music by black artists had been race records or race music, which is like crazy town, right? So they came up with this term rhythm and blues so that you knew if a hit song was on the rhythm and blues chart, like the pop chart and the rhythm and blues chart, right? If it was a pop song, it was by a white artist. If it was a rhythm and blues song, it was by a black artist. And they did that to keep the lists segregated, which again is crazy because nowadays, if you hear a song by like Usher or whatever, and it's really popular, it's just on the top of the chart. You don't think like, oh, Usher's a black man, so it's, and back in the 40s, it wasn't necessarily that way. So at this time, music, ooh, my computer's beeping. All right. So people tended to only listen to music by artists of their own skin color, especially in white communities. There was often no radio play of songs by black artists on white radio stations. So by the time we hit the 40s, we're into radio, right? Everyone's listening to the radio as a huge source of news, entertainment. Huge. Imagine there's no internet, there's no TV. TVs would come along here in the next 10, 15 years. But again, not everyone had one, or you only had one if you had money. So the radio was like the lifeline of news, information, and music. And if it was a white radio station, like if they were in a white area, or like a town, or an area that was predominantly white or owned by white people, they would not play rhythm and blues records typically. And it was the other way also. If it was a rhythm and blues radio station, they typically weren't playing white records either. So again, the blues already existed, but this new genre called rhythm and blues had an up-tempo driving beat in the bass and in the drums. And when I say the bass, I mean like the boom, 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 boom bass, not just the bass drum. And it had a tempo that was great for dancing, which was a huge change, because blues stuff is cool to listen to, but you can't really dance to the blues. You can like bob to it, but you can't like flat out go out and dance on a Saturday with, you know what I mean? It's a different kind of vibe. So what made that kind of just come alive for people was because they could dance to it, and it was fun, and it was up tempo. All people of all different races loved it. Okay. So it wasn't so much just Black kids listening to it or white kids listening to it. Everyone was kind of getting in to rhythm and blues. Young America. When I say everyone, I mean like young America, who typically tend to drive the music popularity, right? So it contained different themes than typically music listened to by white Americans. It had the triumphs and failure of relationships, right? How many songs have we heard that are about love or breakup or wanting to be with someone or whatever? And again, a lot of these topics at the time, especially in white America, were things people didn't discuss. I know that's really hard to imagine because we live in a culture now where every thought that's on everyone's mind just comes blurting out, and it's all over the internet and it's everywhere, right? But again, back in the day, people were much more cautious and conservative about reputation and not saying things that were improper. You didn't talk about personal things. So having a song that you'd be singing about maybe you got broken up with or something like that would be considered inappropriate. I know that's so hard for some of us to imagine. It's hard for me to imagine even not being able to talk about that stuff. But also talked about freedoms, economics, aspirations, and sex. And again, the topic of sex in the 1940s, you did not talk about that, right? You didn't talk about that. You didn't sing about that. You didn't buy records that talked about those things, even in a song. So this started to kind of push the boundaries of what people considered to be like safe or appropriate for their kids to listen to. And you all know what happens when you tell a teenager they can't do something, right? They just want to do it more, listen to these records more, buy these records more, sing along to these records with their friends more. So it kind of backfired in a lot of ways. In these rhythm and blues bands, we start to see a vocalist or singer. I misspelled piano in this document. Awesome. Okay, it's not piano, it's piano. One or two guitars, bass, drums, sometimes a saxophone or two or three even in some cases, and sometimes even background singers. After the 1950s, rhythm and blues would be referred to more commonly as R&B, which may be how some of you have heard of it before, and it would branch off into more of a soul, gospel, electric blues direction, but it would still primarily be Black artists, but it kind of diverged. You had the rhythm and blues that went toward rock and roll, and the rhythm and blues that went more toward soul, gospel, electric blues, and that's what we tend to call R&B to this day. However, without these 1940s and 50s jump blues and rhythm and blues tunes, rock and roll would not have existed. Many music historians believe the first song to transition officially from rhythm and blues to rock and roll was Rocket 88 by Jackie Brenston and the Delta Cats, which we will listen to here in a moment. In 1951, Cleveland, Ohio radio DJ Alan Freed would start playing rhythm and blues records on his late night radio show, which was called the Moondog Rock and Roll House Party. And this was a defining moment because Alan Freed was a white guy and he played rhythm and blues records on his radio show. And in doing that, he sort of opened the floodgates, as it were, to this being, I don't know if it necessarily made it more acceptable, but it started to happen. You know, once one person does it, it makes it easier for the next person to do it, right? He allegedly, there's no way to confirm this 100%, but it is said that Freed was the first to call rhythm and blues rock and roll. Again, there's no 100%, because you have songs from that era that sing about rocking and rolling, so maybe someone else technically said it first, but he said it on the radio, and he said it a lot, and that is why to this day, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is in Cleveland, Ohio, because it is said that since rock and roll, the phrase, was coined in Cleveland, Ohio, that it is the birthplace of rock and roll. Again, that could be, but I don't know if you can definitively say that if the music wasn't written there. You know what I mean? So that's why that is said. And here's a picture of Alan Freed on the radio. Well, not probably actually on the radio, posing like he's on the radio. And here's a really funny old poster. This is like some pre-Photoshop shenanigans. And we'll talk more about Alan Freed because he had an interesting end. So Alan Freed, you should not miss this on the quiz. Alan Freed is the only white man, because he didn't actually make on this quiz anyway, not the only white man ever, the only white man on this quiz. And he's only on here because being a radio DJ, he did not write any of these songs. All of the artists that made this amazing music are black artists. So on the quiz, you should not miss the whodat for Alan Freed, please. People every year miss it. It blows my mind. All right. So below here, we have 9 artists. 8 of them are solo artists who had bands, and 1 is a band. So when you do these notes, you need to put in order. Just go straight across, like 1, 2, 3, next line, 1, 2, 3. You have to list who they are, and that is on the Rock website, okay? Which is linked in the week plan and on Google Classroom like 5 different times. You need to list who these different artists are and be able to know them, because they're going to be on the quiz. You have to look at an artist and be like, oh, that's Ruth Brown. Click and just know, okay? And the reason I'm putting so much emphasis on these is because I can't quiz you on the songs. If you were taking this class in person, I would quiz you on every single song, and we would listen to them all, and you'd have to write down who it was. It's really tough to do that on the online platform. So I'm putting more emphasis. You really have to know all these artists, okay? Because we can't always listen to their songs more than once or twice on your own. And that's really on you. If you really want to get to know this music, you have to listen to it. I cannot come to your house and force you. Okay, and then we have these 7 definitions here. We've got rhythm and blues, segregated, driving beat, R&B, Rocket 88, Alan Freed, and the Moondog Rock and Roll House Party. So know what all of those are, okay? And please try and use the words from the text. Don't just Google it, because I can tell people are they're Googling and then copy pasting into their document. Like, I can tell if it's a Encyclopedia Britannica answer and not you. Like, I wasn't born yesterday. Hello. All right. And then you're going to go to your Spotify. And remember, we're going to Origins still. This is the last unit. We're going to be on Origins here. So we find our Origins playlist. And we're all the way down under country now. Oh, it's loading. There we go. All right, all the way down here under country. The first one on this list is Caledonia by Louis Jordan. And Louis Jordan is the first person you see. Oop, wrong document. Wrong document. There it is. So you're going to listen to the song. And on your document, you're going to type what you hear when you listen to this song. Okay? People seem to be confused by the listening jots. You have to actually jot down notes while you are listening. Hence, they are listening jots. People tend to be treating this as a list. It is a list, but it is a listening jot. You have to jot while you listen under the songs and then turn it in. Please and thanks. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 8, 9 songs. They're all really good. Toe tappers, I promise. My favorite is, well, I don't know if I have a favorite. I've got a lot of favorites on this list, but they all have different vibes that they kind of bring from all these different elements of country and blues and spirituals and Tin Pan Alley to some extent because of the business side of it. And yeah, so please listen to these songs in their entirety. Enjoy them. They're super great. Jot notes, please. Okay. I hope that, oh, and you only have 1 sheet this week. So make it good because you only have 1 this week. So, all right. If you have any questions, email me, and I'll be around. Okay. Bye.